Welcome to another episode of The Neophytes, a special series within the Never Close the Inquiry podcast, wherein my good friend Thomas Maybe and I sit down and talk about current issues in politics. We are not experts, neither of us, and that's kind of the whole point. If we repeated our conversation today with the benefit of more time to think things through, it would be different, maybe in small ways and maybe in big ways. The message we're trying to convey is that it's okay not to know. It's okay to keep learning, and it's okay to change your mind. In fact, it's probably good. The fact that you believed something before doesn't mean that when presented with new information or upon reconsideration, you're still locked into that prior view. It's okay, in other words, to never close the inquiry. Good evening. Well, depending on when you're listening to this, Channing and I are recording this on an evening, a Tuesday evening of so it's Tuesday, July 28th. We're starting recording at 8:17 p.m. local time here in the mountains, Salt Lake City at approximately, Channing up north in Bountiful. Are you actually in Bountiful? West Bountiful?
West Bountiful.
West
Yeah,
Bountiful.
West Bountiful. It's an actual city.
Actual city.
Tiny,
Congratulations.
but it's an actual city, yeah.
I sitting here in Salt Lake at approximately 4,700 feet above sea level. I would imagine West Bountiful might be a couple hundred feet lower, but around there.
Yeah, probably a smidge lower, yeah.
Yeah.
We got wetlands.
You got wetlands, right. Soon to be drylands.
They are drylands.
With the way things are going. Okay. So let's start out with a couple of things. First off, I do just a quick shout out to one of our sponsors, A&W Zero Sugar Root Beer. Here, listen. Oh yeah, it's nice. And then, do you have a beverage tonight?
I got my
leaning
Dr.
in.
Pepper. I'm leaning into it. I'm actually working on this one. We started 15 minutes later than I was anticipating, so I started early.
Okay.
And eventually, when I finish this, I'm going to move over to, some just good old. Have you had a Propel? Like the Propel
flavored water?
Yeah, it's tasty.
Yeah. Probably once or
Also
twice. Oh, you got to okay.
have some Propel mixed up in a.
Is that
a shaker?
A new sponsor?
Bottle. Yeah, we definitely could. Propel is delicious. I think it's.
Is it owned by Gatorade?
I think so. I was about to say I think it's.
That's
a Gatorade
totally
product.
fine. We can get it on that Gatorade money.
I think it's a Gatorade product.
Let's get the Gatorade bag.
Hey.
So actually, I'm going to turn your mic up a little bit. Not 100% sure how to do it. Whatever. We can do that on the back end.
Something I've heard often in my life.
Yeah. So, okay, this evening, this due to the constraints of my day and night job is going to have to be a shorter episode. So we're going to go in for a hard-hitting half hour tonight. Oh, of course, another disclaimer. It's just us. Mabe's not able to make tonight's recording. It's fine. We'll catch him hopefully next time.
He will be missed.
Yes. Democratic Socialists. How long have you been one?
0.
No? Oh, okay. Sorry, that was a misread. So Democratic Socialists are having a moment. This is top of mind for a number of reasons. The chief reason, and this will give listeners insight into how we decide what we're going to talk about. Chief reason being an article that just dropped in the Wall Street Journal about 20 minutes ago. But Wall Street Journal, one of our nation's fine papers. Brief tangent. Trust in the mainstream media, trust in the media is not particularly high. Trust in information generally, I don't know, trust in particular sources, maybe we would not say is at an all-time high. However, I think the trio of the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, and the Washington Post, and there are
Fox.
What?
You missed Fox.
I missed Fox. No, let me finish the sentence, then I'll get to Fox. Those three, I think, are the most consistent and most sophisticated in their original reporting. You can get commentary, some of it good, some of it absolutely atrocious, on many other websites. But often the quote unquote reporting on other sites is derivative reporting. They're going off, they're writing their short little blurbs from the Associated Press, or they are publishing commentary that is based on original reporting that came out of one of these big three, and there are some others with less of a national uh, readership base. Boston Globe, LA Times are famous, and then most major cities have their own local paper, which does or set of local papers which do good work. But it's very difficult to replace the funding that these major legacy newspapers have, and because of that, even if you disagree with their political slant, I think they are still worth reading and heeding for the most part, with a grain of salt. And I think if you average the information you get from the Journal, the Post, and the Times, you end up getting and then maybe read a little bit of contrarian commentary, you're going to get a fairly good sense of what's happening. Anyway, so the Wall Street Journal came out with this article about Democratic Socialists. It's entitled "A Small Band of Socialists is Sowing Panic in the Democratic Party." And I would read a little bit of this because I think it sets the context for some broader things. Obviously, Zohran Mamdani is mayor of New York City. He is in New York City. He is popular, and he is, I think, by any measure, deeply charismatic. He's a good communicator, a good political communicator. There are reasons for many people to disagree with his policies, platform, way he looks at the world, all sorts of things. But he is, I think, a remarkably talented, remarkably talented politician. I think you can kind of leave it at that. And Democratic Socialists are, they're seeing success in primaries across the country. So there are going to be a lot of major tests in November. Some of them are winning I think they're winning in safe seats. So you're likely to see more of them in Congress. Others, maybe you're going to see them get smoked by a Republican, but we'll see. But anyway, let me start this article, and I apologize for the long intro. Megan Romer likes to spend her free time sewing costumes for school plays, picking blackberries in her backyard in rural Cayuga County, New York, and watching her partner play the fiddle in folk bands. In her day job, she is seeking to overthrow capitalism. Banger of a beginning from the Journal. Romer, 42 years old, is the national co-chairwoman of the Democratic Socialists of America, the far-left organization whose candidates have swept to victory in several recent high-profile races by preying on Democratic incumbents. The next showdown comes next Tuesday when congressional primaries in Missouri and Michigan again pit Democratic Socialists against incumbent Democrats. Skipping it a little bit. Already, the DSA's advances are stirring consternation and sometimes panic among mainstream Democrats dreading their own Tea Party moment, in which a radical fringe hijacks the party and taints their brand, just as they are trying to appeal to swing voters to win control of Congress in November's midterms. Just this month, the DSA called for defunding the Defense Department, abolishing police. That I have to read that again. Defunding the Defense Department. So that's the one over all the military and such. That would free up a lot of capital for other stuff. Anyway, called for defunding the Defense Department, abolishing police, and getting rid of the Senate, and replacing the President and Supreme Court with representatives chosen by and subordinate to Congress. Now, I don't mean to be too reactionary as our resident kind of dirty lib, but traditional, kind of traditionalist, in many ways. Pass. And I have another person that I want to bring up, but first I want to get what your initial reaction to that extended monologic intro.
The initial reaction for me is obviously I disagree strongly, right? And in my mind, I try to take a step back because obviously some of those things are very important to me, and so they get my hackles up a little bit, like when you want to like really just like jump on it and be like, this is like the worst idea ever and these people are stupid. But that's not true.
Mhm.
And you take a step back and you go, let me try to understand where they're coming from. And,
Mm.
something for me is like, I totally understand idealism, right? I understand ideals,
Sure.
and it's interesting because if we talked about it at the end of the day, there's probably a lot of end goals that we both would like to see, to be
Mhm.
honest. Their path is just very different from what I see is a realistic path. So my initial gut thing is, wow, you know, uh, good luck with that. Um, I hope you actually don't have any luck with that because I think that's a really bad idea. And also, I pity Democrats for when a certain fringe gains momentum
Mm.
because it always makes things difficult for people that are closer to the center, and so it's just kind of like one of those things where as that gains more steam, fringe elements on the right will continue to paint a broad brush of people who do these things, and I feel like it creates a lot of division and stuff. So anyways, that's just the time we live in. I'm not saying it's a bad thing to have diverse beliefs and whatever, and these people can have their beliefs, and honestly, if everyone talks about things, there might be some good ideas that can come from these people, but I really don't like it, and I'm just I
You know
crazy.
what? That was a very magnanimous answer, I think. A
Thank
magnanimous
you.
opening statement from
Thank you.
resident leaning conservative. And so I have a few initial thoughts. So let's anchor this in a couple of things. One of which is so the president is currently President Donald J. Trump. Uh, he is not popular in the polls. There's a lot happening right now that is not popular with the American people. Conflict in Iran, the Iran war, however you want to characterize it, uh, is not in a great spot. Iran tonight, we got the news, attacked U.S. bases after a couple of days of no missiles. Basically, we continue to see this kind of missile-focused war, and it's not clear what exactly our goals are at this point, and how we would achieve them, and then assuming we have like a path to achieving them, how likely it is we're able to traverse that path
I
and
feel like the
and get to the
missiles,
finish
by the
line.
way, are like an obligatory thing that each side's doing to be like, we're not capitulating. And they just like shoot off some missiles occasionally
Yeah.
because like it really seems like both sides are kind of like, don't be wrong, Iran has the advantage of if they just kind of like if everyone just kind of like slowly walks away from this, Iran kind of wins a little
That's a
bit,
big
right?
win for the
Like it's a
government of
big win
Iran.
for
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
But for them, I don't feel like they have. I mean, their goal is hold out, right? And I guess
Mhm.
that's a pretty lofty goal, just period. I mean, that's a pretty strong goal, but it does feel like both sides are. I mean, the U.S. doesn't know what to do. Uh, their plan didn't go well. It's not
Well,
going well.
no. No.
Um, they haven't been able to shift things. That they just don't have a goal, so they keep shooting missiles to be like, "Oh, you guys, we're serious. You should probably give up." And then Iran, they shoot a couple missiles off occasionally to be like, "We haven't given up." And
Yeah.
it's just like it's bad. And the problem is though is that people get shot at, right? I mean, this is real lives that are being,
People are dying.
people are
Yeah.
dying, right? Like these
Yeah.
are real things.
Including American soldiers.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
not only that, but then you've also fear is the worst of all business, right? Like anything
Mm.
to do with business, no one likes uncertainty because that's
Right.
money,
Yeah.
right?
Correct. Yeah.
So you still have the straight all anyways. So yeah, not great. Not great. Sorry, I
Not
went off on
great.
a tangent. Not great.
No, 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 no. Really not great. And that's just one of the things that's going on right now that's not great. That
Yep.
has these ancillary effects where it raises prices. Inflation can be an issue. You have Fed Reserve. There is Trump obviously wants rates slashed to, I assume, zero. But at this point, there's a greater chance rates go up than
Yeah.
they stay where they are or go down.
Yep.
We and there are a number of other reasons why Republicans would not be in a particularly strong spot right now. The Epstein files release, it didn't happen super recently, but it did not go well. Did not play well for the president's party, for the president. Financial disclosures recently released by President Trump. So these are not like this is not just made up stuff from TDS suffering libs, but the president has made, I believe, over $2.2 billion during his second term, which smokes our combined income over the
Well,
same
he
period.
had to make up for all that hate that everyone gave to him and cost him money
Yeah,
running
good
for
point.
it, you know?
Good
I mean,
point.
he had to
Good
make it
point.
all up.
Yeah, that's
It's
yeah.
only
That
fair
would be
play.
one way to look at it. A nice 2.2 billion in a year and a half. Solid return on
Being
various
president's hard.
investments. Yeah, yeah. Solid return on various investments that may or may not be benefiting from
Honestly,
the
though,
fact
at
that he
the
is in
rate that
office.
CEOs are being paid, you can make an argument that if CEOs are being paid at what they're being paid, how much worth is the president of the United States, you know?
Well, that's I see the argument, and
I
I
mean,
see where there could be counters.
yeah,
But a number of other things, relationships with our allies are probably worse than they've been in a long, long time. Um,
except for Israel.
except,
Israel's probably farther
good
in
point,
bed with us than they've ever been.
and perhaps vice versa. Kind of seems like maybe.
Yeah,
That yeah,
we've
maybe
tied our we've hitched our horse to that
that wagon,
wagon.
so to speak. Yeah, there's mutual wagoning and horsing and such. But our other allies, things are frostier than has
Well,
historically been the
Europe
case.
I mean, Europe's had a big this has been unfortunately for us, as much as we've complained, and this is where again I kind of diverge. I mean, I don't know. It's a very complicated matter, but as isolationist as we want to be often, what people don't realize is that when the US isolates itself, other countries who have relied on us for things start realizing that they're like, oh, the US isn't going
We
to be there for us. We need to actually do stuff, these other things for ourselves. And I hate to break it to everybody, but we've enjoyed a very large amount of influence in the world because people need stuff from us. Not because
Yes.
they like us per se.
Although
Most
I think
some do. Some
they
do.
do,
Some like
some
us.
do. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. But at the heart of it is like, well, we need them
And
because
not
they
just they
fight
need
things.
it, but they can rely on us.
Right.
I think there's two
Yeah.
parts of it. It's like they
Yeah, it
need
is
they
2
need
parts.
whatever they need. It's like we're a steady source of what they need. Sorry, go
Right,
on.
right. Like stability, for instance, like that's a
Yeah,
huge thing. Like the
yeah,
US, large military, very good at what it does,
yep.
usually.
So,
Economic
better than
firepower,
others.
like
Yeah,
economic firepower. Like when the US says stuff or does stuff, you can like kind of count on it to a degree, right? More so than pretty much anywhere else. And unfortunately, by us retracting that, and I'm not going to say it's all just President Trump. I do think that policy has become harder and harder, and we've been listening to worse and worse people over the
hmm,
years. Personally, that's just a personal belief, but um, I don't know. I definitely think Trump has made it much worse at an accelerated rate because
yeah.
of the way he comports himself. Like, I don't think it's appropriate. And I'm American. I'm probably more open to, people being less formal and less
Mm,
politically correct than a lot of other people. Like other
mhm.
countries or other people expect their leaders to be or people.
Yeah,
But like I'm sitting here and I'm like, that is completely unacceptable language. You can't just like offhandedly talk about genocide or anything like that, like just like
yeah.
stuff like that. And it I don't know. I do
Can
think that
I?
deteriorates.
Yeah, can I put a button on that? Uh, we entered, or Trump came into office, and this has been true for years. It was true well before he came into office, but where a big focus is we cannot decouple from China, but we need to de-risk our relationship with China such that we have redundancies and all these other things, basically where we're limiting the degree to which China can screw us.
Right.
And fast forward a year and a half into his administration, and i am I do not know that we have de-risked our relationship with China. But now we have a bunch of our most stalwart allies seeking to de-risk their relationships with us. And
Yeah.
that, I think, is not and again, they are doing that because they do not see us as reliable, or as reliable as we historically have been. And I think that puts us in a weaker position than we were in before, we prompted these countries to start that process. And yeah, again, I don't know, maybe that process. I think for a long time, countries have known, like, yeah, we should probably de-risk our relationship with the U.S. Like, we're too reliant on them. But President Trump has driven that point home in a way that I think is more harmful to us than might have been if we had kind of mutually cooperated on these paths that gave these countries redundancies. Um, Point being, putting a button on all of this, Democrats have a very good opportunity to pick up seats in November. And you pick up seats. There are a couple of ways to pick up seats. Well, no, there's one way to pick up seats. You get votes. And there are multiple ways to get votes. So I think there are a lot of moderate Democrats who think, okay, if we are pretty normal, we're just kind of standard Democrat, we're focusing on costs for people, and on foreign policy, we're actually quite similar to Republicans, but we're just basically going to be similar, but a little more spendy and generous from the government side, a little more higher tax on wealthy and whatnot, and then and with that, by being at least a little bit palatable to people on the right, we're going to pick up a lot of voters, a lot of independent voters, and a lot of people who are kind of soft righties and don't like the direction that their party is pushing the country. But you also, because the Democratic Party has been so shockingly weak now for a bit, and so devoid of leaders worth following. Is that a way to put it? Weak stock, weak group of candidates for a little bit now. Had some very good ones for a little bit. Clinton was a very good one. Obama was a very good one. And I'm not talking necessarily about them as the actual president. I have my views on that. Other people have their views. But as candidates, fantastic. And Democrats now, Biden won, but wasn't necessarily the best candidate of all time. He was helped by his opponent. And then Harris, I think, was a very weak candidate. And now it's not apparent that anyone stronger than Harris has yet come to the fore. Anyway, so you have there's a lot of frustration with the Republican Party right now, but there's also an incredible amount of frustration with the Democratic Party, which is giving Democratic Socialists the biggest opening they've ever had. And they are, to their credit, taking advantage of it. And they're getting they're winning a lot of primaries. They're influencing a lot of primaries where they're not winning or influencing the discussion. And they're making the news.
I
Recently.
I
Or sorry,
also
go ahead.
think they're winning the hearts and minds of the younger generations that
Yes.
can vote and stuff. And it's yeah, they're winning that battle of speaking to ideals that people want, right? Because it's super frustrating,
Yeah.
and people who lean more to the left, people are looking for change, right? This is how we get our elements like Trump and everything, because you get people on the right who you got all of a sudden you have doers, right? People with ideals that they're very strong with. They might convince you that they have a strong plan for the future. You want to change, and you follow them over the hill because you're just like, well, this is better than me being on the back of the hill. So let's go up the hill and see where that takes us. And so I just feel like this is kind of a Democratic equivalent of it a little bit,
Hmm.
because this is probably one of the first times that some cohesion, that like a more cohesive, probably well displayed kind of process, thought and vision is being given, and a lot of people want change. And
Yeah.
I tell you what, the ideas are great in terms of the end goal. The end goal ideas are great.
So that's perfect. That's a perfect lead into my next question, and this pretty much is the question for the day. But so let's stipulate that much of what democratic socialists want actually is popular. I think things like defunding the Defense Department, abolishing
Right.
the police, I think
Not so much.
these are genuinely not popular. These are just
Yeah.
flat out not popular. Uh, at democratic socialists, they're consistent with their other ideals or semi-consistent, whatever. Uh,
Mhm.
on balance, American people like cops. They like having cops around. They like
Yeah.
having a military, and they like having the world's strongest military. These are
Yep.
all things that enjoy broad support. Like individual conflicts and individual cops might not have a lot of support. Like if
Right.
people see a police officer shoot somebody, it's like really
Sure.
not a fan of that. But generally speaking, people like law enforcement and
Yeah.
country enforcement.
Yep.
Um, so anyway, but there are a lot of ideas for which democratic socialists are pushing, like Medicare for all, and maybe I don't know what some of the other ones are, but like a lot of
Taxes, right? Taxes
taxes,
on the
higher
rich.
taxes on the wealthy,
Even better social programs, right?
rent
Cap
freezes.
cap things, make housing affordable, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
So a
Strong
lot of stuff
messages.
like that
Yeah.
uh, either straight up is popular, like Medicare for all, I think is actually popular. I think that actually polls pretty well. Like when Bernie has run for president, he's always able to run with. He always does run with like these polls where it's like 87% of the American people support Medicare for all, or something akin to that. And it's right that a lot of these individual policies there is very high public support, not a lot of support from the people whose money you need or who happen to be in Congress currently, but generally broad support for a lot of these things because they sound really nice. They sound really nice. They're
Mhm.
things that people can support. But a question I have, a major hesitation I personally have with people, and this is not solely true for democratic socialists, for people on the left. It's true for them, for me, because I happen to personally lean left. But the question of the slippery slope. And I raise that because I've spoken to a lot of Republicans who acknowledge the appeal of certain ideas, who agree
Absolutely.
that taxes on certain sectors should be higher or would agree with an expansion of certain social programs. But they're very uncomfortable with the idea that that expansion would not be the end. And that really what Democrats, and maybe me in the conversation or whatever, what Democrats are pushing for is something beyond that.
Right.
And that, to me, is a big hang up for democratic socialists because though a lot of them are grateful for whatever changes you can get now and are willing to work within the system, that's not what they actually want. They want something far beyond that. They genuinely want to democratically establish socialism.
Right.
And there was so recently, Ross Douthat, who I believe is now leaving the New York Times for CBS News, which is a huge get for CBS and a bummer for New York Times. And that CBS must have given him a massive amount of money because I think he was making a lot for the Times. But anyway, he had on to his podcast Interesting Times. Maybe he'll be able to do both gigs. I don't know. Bhaskar Sunkara, and I apologies to him if I'm saying his name wrong. He's he's a a former vice chair of the Democratic Socialists of America, the author of the Socialist Manifesto: The Case for Radical Politics in an Era of Extreme Inequality, the founder of Jacobin, which is how it's so funny. So many of these things, I've seen them in print, but I've never actually had a conversation about it. So Jacobin, which is a reference to the go back to the French Revolution, but it is a socialist magazine. Um, and uh, yeah, uh, American Socialist magazine based in New York City, founded in 2010. And I read some articles there from time to time. It's interesting because they have really smart socialists write about stuff. But so in this conversation with Douthat, it's very, very interesting conversation, in part because he acknowledges that we are not living in the worst of all possible worlds here in the US. We have this mixed capitalist socialist system where we do have a lot of kind of social insurance programs with Social Security and Medicare, even if it's not for all, and even the healthcare marketplace. We do have a fair amount of what people on the left are looking for. And he also speaks in the interview, which is worth reading or listening to, he speaks favorably of markets to a great degree. He acknowledges that markets are very important at this point, that you need them for investment and all these things. You need people to compete and produce excess income that can be taxed and can fund programs and all this stuff. He speaks, you know, for a while. It's funny because reading from the moderate left, it's very refreshing to hear him say all these things that are comforting to the ears of what maybe we will call I was going to say democratic capitalists, but it's probably a term of art. But Democrats who happen to be devoted capitalists and think that capitalism is a decent idea. But so he speaks of all this, goes on and says, so beyond that, the question is, why would you go about calling yourself a democratic socialist? For me, I call myself a democratic socialist because I actually believe in a socialism beyond capitalism. And, I actually do believe in an economy built on the idea that workers should control their workplaces and on this more radical vision of a society without capitalism, even if it still has a motor needed for investment and for efficiency gains and growth and so on. I don't know these subjects well enough to know fully what he means by that. 'Cause there's a lot in there that, like, I think people like, and we have many companies which are at least partially owned by their employees. Um, Certainly not equally, but yeah. Anyway, but the basic point being that it's like, yeah, whatever we're getting now, we'll take it. We'll take it. If we can get that, we'll take it. But what we really want is to get rid of all this stuff that you might like. And that to me seems like a hang up, where it's like, okay, if you're asking for why, and maybe I'm willing to give you why. I like why. But really what you want is Z, and that Z's a genuine just, yeah, I'm out, dog,
Non-negotiable.
non-negotiable, then I understand why, like, there would be hesitation about giving them why. Or maybe we go with why, but we only do why if we have other people in charge. And so the big question I want your response to, and then this is going to be a short episode. We're going to call it good and leave listeners hanging. But to what degree are Democrats holding themselves back if democratic socialists who genuinely are idealists, who very well might want to quote unquote abolish capitalism, to what degree are Democrats holding themselves back if a good chunk of the people on the ballot in November want to go far beyond what the actual the mainstream Democratic Party's platform says?
All I have to say is this: you're looking at the lens of the Republicans for the last little while. Like this is quite so. You have
What do
you
you mean
have
by
a
that?
group because for anyways, those of us sitting on the more moderate Republican,
Yeah.
you have a group that gains steam that is very like, we're going to make America great, right?
Mm,
Here are these things that we're going to do. And you're like, well, I like Y, but
mm-hmm.
you're talking about Z.
Right.
And you're like, and then they start talking about like, well, don't worry. We want Z, but we know we have to work within the system. So we're gonna get Y all the way. And you're like, it's
Right.
scary. I don't know. Because you're saying one thing, but you've also said this other thing. And so I just feel like this is a little bit of a parody
Yeah.
in the
Yeah. Yeah.
situation of like, my only warning to people is this: when people have told you what they want, that is truly what they want. Like if that's their vision,
Yeah.
and you must be very careful when you're like, well, we both agree on why. I think I think the real thing that wins is if if the people that say we're going to go for why, if those people are actually working with people on the other side to try to get to why, that gives me a lot more hope. If
Mm,
someone is just saying we're going to get to why and they're just talking on their side, there is no consequences for them doing whatever they want. Because once they're in, they've won, right? They're on there.
right, right, right.
And you just kind of have to fall in line on the side. So that's kind of my feel on the whole thing is I just see this and I'm just like, well, be careful what you wish for because people really think that our leadership currently is terrible. And I'm like, well, I hate to break it to you, but this is exactly how this largely played out on for moderates on the Republican side,
Yeah.
because it's like, well, yeah, there's a lot of stuff. I agree with that. Like, I want that, but I'm not so sure about the racism part. Like, that
Yeah.
seems a little sketchy to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Don't worry. We're not
R-
going to be racists. It's like, oh, okay. Well, as long as
Good.
we don't cross that line, I
Yeah.
don't know. So I'm just saying,
I'm thinking of Stephen Miller and immigration enforcement right now because I think like immigration enforcement generally very popular.
very
S-
popular.
Stephen Miller's vision of taking every person in the United States who doesn't have a legal right, like documented right to be here, and unceremoniously dumping them in random other countries, and where necessary, splitting up families and getting rid of birthright citizenship, and all this stuff. I think less broadly popular.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. Definitely. But
Yeah.
guess what? They're in power right now.
Yep.
Right? So like
Yeah.
even though moderates that are like, "Hey dude, you're ruining this for the rest of us. Like,
Yeah.
we don't even agree with that and now people hate the Republicans. You don't represent me." You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Right.
and so it's tough, man. It's tough. I feel for you. I feel for you.
Well, we'll see what happens. And I suppose if I were to give advice to people who bona fide leftists, progressives who do want to get stuff done, there are a lot of popular progressive ideas. They're popular, or at least they're popular. I don't even think we really need to qualify. They're popular enough that they could do well on a national scale. And then there's a lot of stuff like defunding the Defense Department and abolishing police and all these other things that are so wildly unpopular that you render the rest of what you're trying to do completely impossible.
Yeah.
So my advice, I suppose, as a and when I say non-idealist, I don't mean I don't have ideals. I think all of us are like idealists at heart, but
Yeah.
then some people remain idealists and other people are like, well, that's not going to work. And so you become a pragmatist. And I from an unrepentantly pragmatic perspective, say maybe stop saying the stuff that's incredibly unpopular and stick with the stuff that is popular.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't know.
Just keep that in the closet until you get elected president.
Yeah.
Then you
And
can
then
tell
the
people all
Trojan
about
horse.
Yeah, Trojan
Yeah.
horse.
It's like you didn't have Greek soldiers like hanging out, like holding the spears outside the horse. No. Trojan
You
horse.
said the things you needed to get into office, and then you let the crazy out.
Here's our nice
Just like
present.
it's just like dating.
You should
You know?
take this. This is a gift. Sorry about the 10-year war. We're gone. You could just give this to Athena. Take it into your house. Yeah, that'll be great. Take it into your nice city. We won't sack the city. We're not inside. Yeah. Well, and with that, close up another episode of The Neophytes. All right, and that was the interview. Thank you very much for listening. If you wouldn't mind, please do leave a review for the podcast. I believe those are important. And subscribe to the newsletter, which will be linked in the show notes, or can be found at neverclosetheinquiry.substack.com. Thanks.